I'm Hazel, 30 years old, and I used to believe family meant unconditional love. My grandfather, Liam, raised me after my mother passed, teaching me lessons no amount of money could buy. My father, Jack, was different. His eyes were always fixed on Grandpa's fortune. At the funeral, when Dad inherited $56 million, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're useless to me now." What he didn't know about the will would turn his world upside down within just 24 hours. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how my grandfather outsmarted my greedy father, even from beyond the grave. My earliest memory of my mother is her gentle hands brushing my hair before bed. Her name was Sarah, and her auburn hair glowed like fire when the sunlight touched it. I was only 8 when cancer stole her away. The hospital stays grew longer, her vibrant face grew paler, and then one day, my father Jack, with dry eyes, told me she was gone. No tears. Just a flat explanation. That mommy wasn't coming home. That's when my grandfather Liam stepped in. While my father buried himself in work and barely noticed me, Grandpa became my anchor. He moved me into his big New England home with its creaking floors and walls lined with books. "Your mother loved this room when she was your age," he said, as he set up my canopy bed, making me feel like a princess despite my grief. Liam Stewart was a self-made man who built a construction empire from nothing. He worked his way through college with calloused hands and sheer determination. By the time I lived with him, his company, Stewart Construction, was worth millions. Yet you'd never guess it, he drove the same Buick for 15 years and taught me that true wealth lives inside you, not in what you show the world. My father, Jack, was the opposite. As Liam's only son, he grew up expecting the family fortune. He worked in the company, but he lacked vision and warmth. The employees respected Liam but only tolerated Jack. I'd hear my grandfather on the phone saying, "Jack has book smarts but no heart for the business." Even as a child, I felt that tension. I tried so hard to connect with my father. At every school play, I searched for his face in the crowd. Most times, his seat was empty. On the rare occasions he came, he left as soon as the curtain closed, always rushing to a meeting. Eventually, I stopped expecting him and cherished Grandpa's steady presence instead. He never missed a single event, always sitting in the front row, camera ready, his face glowing with pride. When it came time for college, I chose business administration, hoping it might finally spark a bond with my father. "See, Dad, I'm following in your footsteps," I told him, thrilled to be accepted into his alma mater. His reaction was flat. "Business is sensible. It'll give you financial security. No congratulations. No pride. Just cold practicality." Grandpa, on the other hand, took me out to celebrate. "Education is never wasted," he said over dinner at my favorite restaurant. "But remember, Hazel, the greatest skill in business is understanding people, not just numbers." That night, he gave me a leather-bound journal. Inside the cover he had written, "To see the true measure of a person, watch how they treat others when they think no one is looking." As I grew older, the contrast between these two men became sharper. My father only came to Grandpa's house for business discussions. His interest in me was limited to quick, polite questions about my studies, his eyes always drifting to the antiques and art, mentally calculating their worth. Meanwhile, Grandpa and I built our own traditions. Sunday mornings were for Belgian waffles made from his mother's recipe, paired with talks about everything from politics to philosophy. He challenged me with questions rather than lecturing. "A mind needs exercise just like a muscle," he'd say. Those conversations shaped me more than any class ever could. When I graduated with honors, Grandpa was there in the front row, beaming with pride. My father? He claimed a business emergency kept him away. That night, Grandpa handed me a small box. Inside was my grandmother's sapphire ring. "Your mother wore this on her graduation day too," he said softly. "Strong women in this family have carried it for generations. Now, it's your turn." As the years went by, Liam's health declined. At 78, his once strong frame grew frail, and doctors diagnosed him with congestive heart failure. Without hesitation, I moved back into my childhood home to care for him. My marketing job could be done remotely, and nothing mattered more than being there for the man who had always been there for me. That's when Jack suddenly started showing up more often. His rare visits became weekly. He'd arrive with expensive wines, sitting with Liam, reminiscing about the past in a way I'd never seen before. To outsiders, it might have looked like a loving son reconnecting with his aging father. But I noticed how his questions always circled back to the business, the will, and the estate. And Grandpa noticed too. One evening after Jack left, my grandfather reached for my hand. "People show you who they are, Hazel. It is not your job to make excuses for them." I wanted so badly to believe Jack was finally showing real concern for his father. But deep down, I recognized the same pattern I'd seen my whole life. The closer Liam came to the end, the more Jack seemed focused on the beginning of his inheritance. The doctor's words hit like a physical blow. 6 months. Maybe less. We sat in that sterile consultation room as Dr. Patel explained that Liam's heart was failing quickly. My grandfather received the prognosis with the same calm dignity that defined his life. Well then, he said quietly, we'd better make the most of the time we have left. That very day, I packed up my apartment and moved back into my childhood bedroom. My marketing clients understood when I explained I had to scale back to care for my grandfather. I passed some projects to colleagues and kept only the ones I could handle between caregiving. Money grew tight, but that was the least of my worries. Liam's condition required constant attention. I learned to give him his medications, track his oxygen, and notice the small signs that marked good days from bad. Lydia, the home nurse, came 3 times a week, but most of the care was on me. I set up a little desk in the living room so I could work while sitting beside him. Despite his weakening body, Liam's mind stayed sharp. Our conversations deepened, as if the nearness of death stripped away every filter. I have no regrets. About the business, he told me one afternoon as sunlight streamed through the bay window. But I do regret the distance with Jack. I wonder if I pushed him too hard, or not hard enough. When he grew too tired to hold books, I read to him. Hemingway, Steinbeck, biographies of great figures. Our nights were filled with stories. Sometimes he'd stop me mid-paragraph to share a memory the words had stirred. Life is just a collection of stories, Hazel, he once said. Make sure yours is worth telling. On good days, we sat in the garden he had tended for decades. His roses were his pride, each variety chosen and cared for with patience. Everything worthwhile takes time, he explained, teaching me how to prune them from his wheelchair. Remember that with people, too. The best ones reveal their beauty slowly. During these months, Jack began visiting twice a week, often bringing expensive takeout Liam could barely eat. I noticed how casually my father slipped business talk into these visits. The Jefferson contract is almost finalized, he'd say. The profit margins look excellent. Liam would listen politely, but I often caught the knowing look he'd give me afterward. One evening, after Jack left, Liam asked me to help him to his study. Once the door closed, he said firmly, I need you to call Harold Jenkins. It's time to review some paperwork. Harold had been his attorney, and his friend, for more than 40 years. He arrived the next day with a briefcase full of documents. They spent hours behind closed doors, while I waited outside, my curiosity tugging at me but my respect for their privacy stronger. When Harold finally emerged, he gave me a gentle smile and patted my shoulder. Your grandfather is a wise man, Hazel. Always has been. He declined my offer of tea, saying he had everything he needed for now, but would be in touch. That night, Liam seemed more at peace. Promise me something, he said as I adjusted his pillows. Promise me you'll live by your own values, not anyone else's expectations. I promise, I whispered, fighting tears, and one more thing, he added, his voice suddenly stronger. Don't worry about your future. I've made sure you'll be taken care of. I assumed he meant spiritually, never imagining the literal truth of those words. As his health declined, Jack's visits grew more frequent. He began bringing company documents for Liam to review, ignoring the doctor's warnings about stress. Dad needs to stay connected to what he built. He insisted whenever I objected. He even studied Liam's medicine schedule, asking pointed questions about his condition. Liam continued private meetings with Harold. Sometimes their hushed voices fell silent as soon as I entered the room. Once, I overheard Liam say firmly, he needs to learn. This is the only way. The final week came sooner than the doctors had predicted. Liam was bedridden, his breathing labored despite the oxygen. I rarely left his side, sleeping on a cot beside him. Jack visited daily now, his concern appearing more genuine as the end drew near. On the last night, while Jack stepped out to take a call, Liam beckoned me closer. His voice was barely a whisper. Remember who you are, Hazel. Blood does not always make family. He squeezed my hand with surprising strength. The truth always finds a way to reveal itself. Liam Stewart passed peacefully at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in October. I was holding his hand, telling him about the sunrise soon to come, when I realized his chest had stopped rising. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by my quiet sobs. I called the hospice nurse first, then Jack. My father answered groggily, but his tone sharpened the instant I gave him the news. I'll be right there. Don't call anyone else. Yet. He arrived in a suit, despite the early hour. After the doctor confirmed the death and left, my father did something that struck me as unsettling. Before even acknowledging my grief, he began rifling through desk drawers and scanning bookshelves. What are you doing? I asked through tears. Looking for the will, he replied matter-of-factly. Dad mentioned keeping a copy here. I sat in shock by my grandfather's bed while Jack made calls to board members and the funeral home, taking charge with a cold efficiency that felt almost cruel. There was no space for grief in his actions, only business. In that moment, I felt more alone than ever before. The morning of Liam's funeral arrived under heavy gray skies. Clouds threatened rain that never came, just like the tears my father never shed. Stewart Construction closed for the day in respect, and the funeral home's parking lot overflowed with cars. Liam had touched countless lives, from employees he gave second chances to clients who had become lifelong friends. I wore a simple black dress my grandfather once admired. Elegance does not shout, he had told me. Then Jack arrived, his assistant trailing behind, frantically scribbling notes on who attended and what connections could benefit the company. The church was overflowing, people standing along the walls and spilling into the foyer. I sat in the front row, clutching a box of tissues in trembling hands. Beside me, Jack checked his watch as if he had somewhere more important to be. When it came time for eulogies, Jack spoke first. His words were polished and professional, full of phrases like financial stewardship and market leadership. They rang hollow in that sacred space. He spoke of Liam the businessman, but not Liam the father or grandfather. Then it was my turn. My legs felt wooden as I approached the podium. Looking out at the sea of faces, I took a deep breath and spoke from my heart. My grandfather measured wealth not in dollars, but in moments, I said. He believed a person's true legacy is the love they leave behind. I shared memories of Sunday waffles, life lessons in the garden, and the quiet strength he showed in his final days. Among the crowd, I noticed an elderly man near the back. His silver hair was neatly combed, his posture respectful but alert. When he approached me afterward, I realized it was Harold Jenkins, my grandfather's attorney. A beautiful service, Harold said warmly, clasping my hand. Liam would have been proud of your words, especially you, Hazel. He handed me his card. The will reading is tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Liam's home. Please be on time. Jack overheard and immediately inserted himself. I've cleared my schedule, he told Harold. Will the company transfer papers be ready as well? Harold's expression stayed neutral. All relevant documents will be presented tomorrow, Mr. Stewart. His formality with Jack contrasted sharply with the warmth he'd shown me. The reception afterward was held at Liam's home, our home. Caterers had turned the living room into an elegant, subdued gathering space. I moved through the crowd in a daze, accepting condolences, sharing brief memories. Jack, meanwhile, huddled in corners with associates, using the moment to discuss restructuring opportunities and leadership transitions. Business, under the disguise of mourning. By evening, the house was empty except for Jack and me. I began tidying up despite the caterer's promise to return in the morning. The simple act gave my hands purpose while my heart ached. You should pack tonight, Jack said abruptly as I gathered glasses. I froze. What do you mean? After the will reading tomorrow, I'll be moving in. This house has always been meant for the company's CEO. His tone was flat, like discussing a business transaction rather than shattering my life. But this is my home, I protested. I've lived here since I was 8. As a guest of your father, Jack corrected coldly. The property belongs to the estate, which will transfer to me. You'll need to find somewhere else. Sleep escaped me that night. I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by memories, trying to process not only my grief, but my father's shocking callousness. By morning, my eyes were swollen from crying. But I forced myself to appear composed for the will reading. At exactly 2 p.m., we gathered in Liam's study. Jack sat behind the desk already, a symbolic claim to territory. Harold raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Several executives joined, along with the family advisor and me. Harold placed his briefcase on the desk and opened a thick document. I will now read the last will and testament of Liam Edward Stewart, he said formally. The room fell silent. The opening provisions were standard, funeral arrangements and small bequests to loyal staff. Jack shifted impatiently until Harold reached the main clause. To my son, Jack Liam Stewart, I leave Stewart Construction Company and all its holdings, valued at approximately $56 million, along with the family home and its contents. Jack's face changed instantly. Impatience melted into triumph. He sat taller, already carrying himself as though the crown had been placed on his head. As the newly crowned multimillionaire, the executives murmured their congratulations, though their wary glances flickered in my direction. I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap. I had never expected a large inheritance, but the complete absence of my name felt like a final abandonment. Had my grandfather truly forgotten me? Harold continued reading, listing charitable donations and business transfers. When the meeting ended, people began gathering their things. Jack stayed seated, smiling openly now. As the room emptied, I approached Harold. Is that everything? I asked quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. Before Harold could answer, Jack cut in. You heard it all, Hazel. The company and estate are mine. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket. You have until tomorrow to remove your belongings. Renovations begin Monday. Harold watched with an unreadable expression. Mr. Stewart, perhaps you'd like to review the full document at your leisure, he suggested, offering Jack the thick folder. I caught the important parts, Jack replied carelessly. Send me the summary. He turned to me. As for you, your role as caretaker is over. You were useful only while my father needed someone. Now, you're nothing. The cruelty of his words stole my breath. Years of seeking his approval collapsed in that moment as I finally saw him unmasked. This was my father, someone who could discard his only child the moment she ceased to serve a purpose. As others left, Jack stayed behind to take a phone call. I lingered in the doorway of the study that had been my grandfather's sanctuary, watching my father place his feet on the antique desk with casual disregard. His voice carried, "Yes, I got everything." The old man finally came through. In that instant, something inside me broke. The final thread of hope for redemption snapped. Tears blurred my vision as I turned away, beginning the painful task of deciding which pieces of my life I could pack into a suitcase by morning. The next day dawned with sharp clarity. I had spent the night sorting through 23 years of memories. Every item carried a story, a connection to the grandfather who had raised me. The antique music box from my 16th birthday. The seashells we had gathered on Cape Cod. The hand-knit Afghans my grandmother had made long before I was born. I was placing the last treasure into my suitcase when I heard unfamiliar voices downstairs. Two uniformed security guards stood in the foyer with Jack. "Ah, there you are," my father said coolly. "These gentlemen will oversee the property transition. They'll escort you out when you're ready." His tone was detached, as though addressing a trespasser rather than his daughter. "You hired security to remove me from my home?" My voice trembled with disbelief. "A standard precaution during transitions," he replied smoothly. "Nothing personal." But everything about it was personal. A locksmith was already at work on the front door. "You're changing the locks?" My voice cracked despite my effort to stay composed. "Naturally. The property contains valuable assets." Jack checked his watch impatiently. "How much longer?" "I have meetings this afternoon." The guards shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware of the cruelty they were witnessing. "I'll need help with these," I said, gesturing to my suitcases. One guard stepped forward quickly, grateful for the distraction. As we descended the stairs, memories rose with every step. The banister I had slid down as a child, despite Liam's gentle scolding. The wall marked with my height through the years. The reading nook where my grandfather and I had shared endless books. Jack stood by the door, keys in hand, eager to claim his prize. As the guard loaded my bags into my modest Honda, I took one last look around the entrance hall. The crystal chandelier caught the light, scattering rainbows across the floor, just as my grandfather had once pointed out to delight me. "Is that everything?" Jack asked, barely masking his impatience. I nodded, unable to speak. "Good. The lawyers will contact you if there are remaining formalities." He extended his hand mechanically, as though closing a business deal. I stared at it but didn't take it. Some pretenses were too hollow. Without a word, I walked past him and out the door of the only true home I had ever known. The guard who carried my bags gave me a sympathetic nod. "I'm sorry, miss," he whispered, out of Jack's earshot. The drive to the lakeside and blurred through my tears. I had chosen the modest hotel for its weekly rates, needing time to plan my next steps. My savings were thin after months of caring for Liam. The room was clean but lifeless, its beige walls and generic art a harsh contrast to the character-filled home I'd left. I spread my grandmother's Afghan across the bed, a fragile attempt to make it feel less foreign. Then, at last, I sat by the window and let myself break. Grief came in waves, not just for Liam, but for the father I had never truly had, and the security ripped away in one merciless stroke. The sky darkened as I sat motionless, memories flickering like an old film reel. By the time I forced myself to unpack essentials, it was past midnight. Sleep never came. I tossed and turned in the unfamiliar bed, my mind racing with questions and fears. What would I do now? Where would I live long term? How could my own father be so cold? And had my grandfather really left me nothing, not even a final goodbye? Morning arrived with harsh fluorescent light and the distant rumble of housekeeping carts in the hallway. I forced myself to shower and dress, moving through the motions of normal life while feeling anything but normal inside. My phone showed several missed calls from friends who had been at the funeral, but I couldn't bring myself to explain my situation yet. Instead, I dialed Angela, my closest friend since college who lived in a nearby town. "Can I stay with you for a few days?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Just until I figure things out." "Of course," she replied without hesitation. "What happened?" I'll explain when I see you, I promised, knowing the full story would need to be told. Face to face, after arranging to move into Angela's spare room that evening, I started searching for apartments in the area. The prices shocked me, far higher than I expected. My marketing business had suffered during the months I spent caregiving, and rebuilding my client base would take time. The future stretched out before me, uncertain and intimidating. Around noon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, assuming it was a telemarketer, but instinct made me answer. Hazel Stewart, a formal voice asked. Yes, this is she. This is Patricia from Harold Jenkins' law office. Mr. Jenkins would like to meet with you this afternoon, if you're available. My heart skipped. Did he say what about? Only that it concerns your grandfather's estate and is of urgent importance. We arranged a 3 o'clock appointment. The hours leading up to it crawled by, my mind filled with guesses. Maybe there was a small bequest after all. Or perhaps my grandfather had set aside personal belongings meant for me. The law office was inside a historic building downtown, its interior rich with old-world elegance. Dark wood paneling lined the walls, and shelves of leather-bound law books stretched behind polished desks. After giving my name to the receptionist, I was quickly shown into Harold's private office. The elderly attorney rose to greet me, his expression far warmer than the reserved demeanor he'd worn during the will reading. Thank you for coming on such short notice, Hazel, he said, gesturing to a comfortable chair. I imagine these past 24 hours have been difficult. The simple acknowledgement of my pain broke something loose inside me, and to my embarrassment, tears welled in my eyes. Yes, I managed. Jack had security escort me out. This morning. Harold's eyebrows shot up. Did he indeed? He reached for a leather portfolio on his desk. That is, very interesting timing. What do you mean? I asked. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Did your father even bother to read the complete will? I blinked, caught off guard. The complete will? I was there for the reading. Jack inherited everything, the company, the house, all 56 million in assets. Harold leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Yes, the primary provisions were read aloud, as is customary. But did Jack actually review the entire document afterward, the conditions, the clauses? He told you to send him a summary, I recalled slowly. He said he'd already caught the important parts. A chuckle escaped Harold. That is the Jack Stewart I've known for 3 decades, always too impatient for details. He opened the portfolio and removed a thick, blue-bound document. Your grandfather anticipated exactly this behavior. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? Liam and I spent considerable time crafting this will, especially during the last year as his health declined. Harold put on his reading glasses and flipped to a marked page. The inheritance does indeed go to Jack, but only with very specific conditions attached. He cleared his throat and began to read. The bequest to my son, Jack Liam Stewart, is contingent upon his agreement to provide lifetime support for my granddaughter, Hazel Sarah Stewart. This includes, but is not limited to, housing at the family residence, a monthly allowance of $10,000 for living expenses, and full coverage of any educational or healthcare costs she may incur. My mouth fell open. Harold went on. Should Jack fail to fulfill these obligations at any time, or act in a way that causes significant distress or hardship to Hazel, the entirety of the estate, including Stewart Construction and all associated holdings, shall immediately transfer to her. The room seemed to spin around me. But he already broke that condition. He threw me out this morning. Harold's eyes twinkled. Precisely. And in doing so, less than 24 hours after the will reading, he defaulted on the primary condition of his inheritance. So, what does that mean? I whispered, barely able to process it. It means, my dear, that by the legally binding terms of your grandfather's will, you are now the sole owner of Stewart Construction and all associated assets, valued at approximately $56 million. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. That can't be right. There must be some mistake. No mistake, Harold said firmly, removing his glasses. Liam knew his son better than anyone. He told me, Jack will show his true colors. Within a week, probably within a day. And he was right. Then why not just leave everything to me directly? I asked aloud. Your grandfather was a wise man who understood human nature. He wanted to give Jack one last chance to do the right thing, to be the father he should have been. But he also wanted to protect you, which is why he built in this safeguard. Harold's expression softened. Does Jack know about this yet? I asked. Harold shook his head. No. And his reaction will be enlightening. Your father was too eager to count his millions to read the document that gave them to him. A small laugh escaped him. In 40 years of practicing law, I've rarely seen justice serve itself so swiftly. Slowly, the truth began to sink in. My grandfather hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't abandoned me. Quite the opposite, he had created a test, and my father had failed it almost instantly. The house I'd been evicted from that morning was now legally mine. The company I'd always been kept from was now my responsibility. I don't know how to run a construction company, I admitted, panic creeping into my voice. Liam considered that as well. Harold pulled out another document. This letter outlines his wishes for your transition. He suggests keeping the current executive team while you learn the business, with specific recommendations for mentors within the company. He was confident in your abilities, Hazel. Tears filled my eyes again, but this time, they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of gratitude, of finally feeling seen and valued by the man who raised me. There's more, Harold continued gently. Liam left video messages for both you and Jack. He asked that they be viewed together, with me present. I suggest we schedule that for tomorrow morning. Does it have to be together? I asked, dreading another confrontation with my father. Your grandfather was very clear about that. I believe he wanted you both to witness each other's reactions. Harold glanced at his calendar. Shall we say 10 a.m.? Tomorrow in the conference room, here? I nodded, still overwhelmed by this sudden reversal of fortune. In the meantime, Harold said, handing me a business card, this is the contact information for the estate security company. You may want them to meet you at the house later today. To do what? I asked. A knowing smile crossed his weathered face. To change the locks back, of course. It's your house now, Hazel. As I left the law office, the world felt different. The same streets I had driven in despair that morning now shimmered with possibility. I called Angela to cancel my stay, explaining only that circumstances had shifted dramatically. Are you okay? She asked, her voice full of concern. I think I will be, I replied honestly. For the first time in days, I really think I will be. My next call was to the security company. They agreed to meet me at the house at 5 p.m. to replace the locks and update the system. The representative didn't seem surprised, which made me wonder if Harold had already alerted them. Driving toward the estate, I rehearsed what I might say if Jack was still there. A part of me hoped he'd be gone, delaying our confrontation until tomorrow. Another part wanted to see his reaction when he realized how quickly his cruelty had cost him everything. As I pulled into the circular driveway, my stomach clenched. Jack's sleek black Mercedes was still parked by the front door. Anxiety twisted inside me, but I forced myself forward. This was my home now, not his. My grandfather had made that clear in the most definitive way possible. Right on time, the security team arrived, 3 uniformed officers stepping out of a company van. At the entrance, I explained the legal transfer of ownership and showed them Harold's document as proof. We'll need to inform the current occupant of the change in status, the lead officer said professionally. I understand, I replied. Jack himself answered the door, his face shifting from irritation to shock when he saw me with the team. What is the meaning of this? He demanded. The officer stepped forward. Sir, we've been authorized to update the security protocols. At the request of the new legal owner, Miss Hazel Stewart. Jack's face flushed. That's absurd. I am the owner of this property as of yesterday. I'm afraid there's been a development with the will, I said steadily. Dad, you should contact Harold Jenkins for clarification. You violated the condition tied to your inheritance when you evicted me this morning. What condition? What are you talking about? His voice rose sharply. Perhaps we should continue inside, I suggested, aware of the security team silently watching this family drama unfold. Jack stepped back, and we moved into the study. The officers stayed focused on their work while Jack glared at me. Explain yourself, he demanded. Grandfathers will require you to provide for me, including allowing me to live here. By throwing me out, you broke the terms of your inheritance. My voice stayed calm, firm, factual. His face paled as the meaning sank in. That's impossible. Harold would have said something that was important during the reading. It was in the full document, which you didn't bother to read, I answered. We meet with Harold tomorrow at 10 a.m. to address everything formally. For a moment, Jack seemed to wither before my eyes. Then his expression hardened. This is some kind of trick. You and that old lawyer conspired together. The will was written and notarized months ago, I reminded him. Grandfather knew exactly what would happen. He gave you a chance to do the right thing, and you failed within 24 hours. A polite knock interrupted us. The security leader stepped in. Miss Stewart, the exterior locks have been changed. Where would you like the new keys delivered? Jack stared at him, then at me, disbelief written across his face. This is my house, he insisted, though his voice had lost its strength. Not anymore, I said simply. I'll take the keys now. Thank you. The officer handed me the set. For the first time, I saw my father completely lost. The arrogance that had always defined him was gone, replaced with the realization that he had undone himself. You can't do this to me, he whispered. It sounded less like defiance and more like a plea. "I didn't do this," I said softly. "You did." The next morning, I arrived at Harold's office 15 minutes early, my stomach twisted in knots. Even with the law on my side, the thought of facing my father was daunting. Years of craving his approval had conditioned me to shrink in his presence. "You look just like your mother," Harold said as he walked me to the conference room. "She had the same quiet strength." His words steadied me. Few ever spoke of my mother, and the comparison felt like a gift. The conference room was imposing, an oak table, leather chairs, and a wall-mounted screen. Harold connected a laptop to a projector. "Liam recorded these messages just 2 months ago," he explained. He was very specific about the order. At precisely 10 a.m., Jack entered with a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit. "This is Richard Dalton, my attorney," he announced. Harold nodded politely. "Good morning, Counselor Dalton. For clarity, this is not a negotiation or legal proceeding, but a family matter as specified in Liam Stewart's will. You're welcome to observe, but your presence will not change today's outcome." Jack sat across from me, his expression carefully masked. Gone was yesterday's shock, replaced by cold, calculated composure. "Hazel, this misunderstanding can be resolved easily," he began. "I'm willing to let you stay in the guest house while we figure out a proper arrangement." "There is no misunderstanding," Harold interrupted firmly. "The terms of the will were crystal clear, and Jack broke them within a single day of the reading. Before we talk about any arrangement, Liam asked that you both watch these messages." Harold dimmed the lights and played the first video. My grandfather's face filled the screen, and my throat tightened with emotion. He sat in his study, looking more fragile than I remembered, but with the same sharp intensity that defined him all his life. "Jack Liam," he began, speaking directly to my father. "If you're watching this, then you've done exactly as I predicted. You've cast Hazel aside now that you think your inheritance is secure." My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I've watched you chase wealth your entire life, convinced it would finally bring you peace. The company was never enough. The house was never enough. No amount of money ever filled the emptiness inside you." Liam paused, his expression softening slightly. "I gave you one final chance, Jack. One chance to prove that family mattered more than fortune. All you had to do was share your abundance with your daughter, your only child. But instead, you treated her with the same coldness you always have." Jack's attorney scribbled furiously, while my father's face flushed red. "I built Stewart Construction from nothing," Liam continued. "My hands bled as I laid the first foundations. I worked beside every crew until my body gave out. I didn't build this legacy so it could become a monument to greed." The room fell silent. As Liam leaned closer to the camera, "The company now belongs to Hazel, along with the house and all associated assets. This is not punishment, Jack. It's the natural consequence of your choices. You've always valued money above relationships. Now, you have neither." The screen went dark, leaving a heavy silence behind. Jack stared blankly, his face unreadable. "There is a message for Hazel as well," Harold said softly, starting the second video. My grandfather appeared again, his face warmer this time. "My dearest Hazel," he began, and tears instantly filled my eyes. "If you're watching this, then everything has unfolded just as I expected. I'm sorry for the pain Jack has caused you, though I can't say I'm surprised." He smiled gently. "You showed me what family truly means, not through words, but through how you cared for me in my final months. That was a gift I can never repay, but I can make sure your future is secure." He leaned forward, as though looking directly at me. "Stewart Construction is yours now. Don't be intimidated. You have a gift for understanding people, something Jack never had. The company needs your heart as much as your mind." He held up a framed photo of me and my mother when I was 5. "Sarah would be so proud of the woman you've become. Lead with compassion, Hazel, but never mistake compassion for weakness. You are stronger than you realize." The second video ended, and I wiped tears from my cheeks. Jack sat frozen, his attorney whispering frantically, but he ignored him. Harold turned on the lights. "There is one final message," he said, producing an envelope. He broke the seal. "Liam requested this be read aloud in both your presence." The letter was short but powerful. "Jack and Hazel. Though legal ownership of the company and assets now belong entirely to Hazel, I leave one path for reconciliation. If Jack demonstrates real change and contributes meaningfully to the company for no less than 2 years, Hazel may, at her sole discretion, consider sharing ownership with him. This must come from genuine relationship, not obligation or manipulation." Harold folded the letter and placed it back into the envelope. "That concludes Liam's final communications." The room grew tense. Jack's lawyer leaned in to whisper. But for once, my father silenced him. His shoulders slumped, and his voice was hollow. "This cannot be legal," he muttered, stripped of conviction. "I assure you it is," Harold replied calmly. The conditions were clear. You simply chose not to read them. My office already filed the paperwork to transfer everything to Hazel yesterday, effective the moment you broke the terms. Jack turned toward me, his anger shifting into something closer to desperation. Hazel, be reasonable. I'm your father. This company has been my life's future. You don't know the first thing about running a construction business. I can learn, I answered simply. Grandfather believed I could. Jack's tone softened into one I had never heard before, almost pleading. I made a mistake yesterday. I was overwhelmed with grief. I wasn't thinking clearly. We can fix this, as a family. Family? I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. You've never treated me like family. Even when Mom was dying, you were distant. Grandfather raised me while you chased deals. Yesterday wasn't a lapse in judgment, it was who you've always been. Jack leaned forward, changing tactics again. I can change. I'll prove it. Let me move into the guest house, and we'll run the company together, father and daughter, the way it should have always been. His sudden transformation was so transparent it might have been laughable in another setting. The same man who told me I was useless just a day ago was now playing the role of a caring father. I don't think that would be wise right now, I said carefully. I need time to learn the business and establish myself as the new owner. Without confusion about leadership. You're making a mistake, Jack warned, a flash of his true nature breaking through. The board respects me. The clients know me. They'll never accept you. Actually, Harold intervened smoothly. I spoke with the executive board this morning. They've already been informed of the transition and offered their full support to Hazel. Liam discussed this possibility with each of them over the past year. That revelation shook Jack more than anything else. He planned this all along, Jack muttered. He hoped it wouldn't be necessary, Harold replied. But yes, he prepared for every outcome. Jack stood abruptly. This isn't over. I'll contest the will. You're welcome to try, Harold said evenly. But you should know Liam included a no-contest clause. Any legal challenge means you lose even the path back he left you. The only way forward is through genuine effort. Jack's attorney touched his arm. We should talk privately. As they prepared to leave, I finally spoke. Dad, I said, the word heavy and unfamiliar. Grandfather left you a way back, not to control everything, but to truly be part of the legacy he built. That chance is real. But only if your change is real, too. Jack paused at the door, his back to me. For a moment, I thought he might answer sincerely. But instead, he straightened his shoulders and walked out without a word. When the door closed, Harold exhaled softly. That went exactly as your grandfather expected. He knew Jack would try to fight the will before ever considering reconciliation. Will he actually contest it? I asked. He may try, Harold replied, but he can't win. Liam and I drafted an ironclad document, and Jack's actions yesterday were a clear and documented violation of its terms. Harold gathered his papers. Now, shall we discuss your transition into company leadership? There's a lot to cover. As we walked into Harold's office to begin shaping my unexpected future, a strange tide of emotions washed over me. I felt sorrow for what could have been with my father, gratitude for my grandfather's foresight, and, unexpectedly, a growing confidence that maybe I was more prepared for this role than I had once believed. Liam had entrusted me with his legacy. Now, it was my responsibility to prove myself worthy. Keys carry a different weight when they unlock not just a home, but a legacy. When I turned the key in my grandfather's front door, now legally mine, the familiar creak of the hinges felt like a quiet welcome home. That first night alone in the vast estate was both comforting and disorienting. I chose to sleep in my childhood room instead of the master suite, craving the comfort of familiarity. Morning brought a flood of calls and emails. Congratulations on my appointment as CEO of Stewart Construction. Some messages were genuine, from employees who had known me since I was little. Others carried a thin layer of doubt about my abilities. I saved every message, quietly taking note of potential allies and future obstacles. My first week as owner was an intensive crash course in construction management. Days were spent with department heads reviewing projects and financials, nights buried in industry reports and company history. Thankfully, Liam had built a strong executive team, making the transition less overwhelming than it might have been. Exactly 7 days after our meeting in Harold's office, Jack made his first attempt at reconciliation. He arrived unannounced at the house, holding an expensive bottle of wine and wearing an expression of rehearsed humility. I thought we might talk, he said when I opened the door. Father to daughter. I let him in but left the bottle unopened. What do you want to discuss? I asked. I've been reflecting on Liam's message, he began, shifting uneasily on the sofa's edge. Perhaps I've been too focused on business. Perhaps, I echoed, waiting. I'd like another chance, Jack said, leaning forward. To be the father I should have been. To mentor you in running the company. It was almost convincing, except for the tightness around his eyes. A tell that revealed his words were strategic, not heartfelt. I appreciate the offer, I replied carefully. But before we discuss business, we need to build trust. Maybe we could start with family dinners, completely separate from the company. His smile flickered. Of course. Though my expertise would be valuable during this transition. The Jefferson contract, for example, requires delicate handling. And there it was. His true motive. The Jefferson project was our largest contract, worth millions, that's already being handled, I said evenly. I met with Robert Jefferson yesterday. We've restructured the timeline to fit their budget changes. Jack blinked. You met with Bob personally? He rarely meets with anyone below the executive level. Apparently, I said, he made an exception for Liam's granddaughter. I didn't mention how well it had gone, how Jefferson expressed relief at dealing with someone who valued relationships over profits. Our conversation dragged on, with Jack cloaking business agendas beneath thin layers of family concern. After an hour, he left with a vague promise of a family dinner we both knew would never happen. Over the following weeks, his tactics varied. Sometimes he appeared vulnerable, hinting at health issues or loneliness. Other times, he showed up with business contacts in tow, hoping to force access to operations. Once, he even brought old family photos, a transparent attempt at emotional manipulation. The pattern was always the same: warmth at first, then an inevitable pivot back to business control. Each time, I held firm boundaries while keeping the door open for a genuine relationship, just as my grandfather had wished. Meanwhile, I was finding my rhythm at Stewart Construction. My background in marketing became an unexpected advantage. As we expanded our digital presence and modernized client communications. Slowly, the executive team shifted, bringing me problems directly, trusting that I would offer fresh solutions. 3 months into my role, I made my first major decision. The creation of the Liam Stewart Foundation. Its mission, providing trade education for underprivileged youth, was both a tribute to my grandfather's values and a commitment to the future of the industry. The announcement drew widespread praise and media attention. Jack showed up at the launch event uninvited, hovering near me during photo ops as if he had been involved all along. I chose not to correct reporters who assumed his presence meant support. My focus remained on the foundation's mission, not family politics. Later that evening, as the event quieted down, Jack approached me at the bar. Clever move with the foundation, he said, signaling for a scotch. Good publicity. It isn't about publicity, I corrected. It's about honoring grandfather's values. Jack studied me over the rim of his glass. You really believe that, don't you? That business can be about more than profit. I do. I met his gaze steadily, just as grandfather once did. Something shifted in Jack's expression, then came a flicker of realization, as if he finally understood that Liam's legacy was about more than numbers. He left you more than the company, Jack said quietly. He left you his perspective. It was the most genuine thing my father had said since the inheritance transfer. For a brief moment, I saw what our relationship might have been under different circumstances. Yes, I acknowledged. And that's worth more than $56 million. Jack nodded slowly, finished his drink in silence, and left without his usual pitch to be involved in the business. I wouldn't hear from him again for 3 weeks. During that time, I made another important decision. After much thought, I set up a modest trust fund for Jack, enough for a comfortable life, but without giving him any control over the company's assets. Harold, my lawyer, advised against it legally, but supported me personally. Your grandfather would admire your compassion, the elderly man said. Just be careful it isn't mistaken for weakness. When Jack learned of the trust, his reaction surprised me. Instead of using it as leverage to demand more, he accepted it with quiet dignity. Our next meeting carried a different tone, less calculating, more reflective. Over the following months, we began to form something resembling a real relationship. Fragile and awkward at first, built on careful conversations about neutral topics. For the first time, Jack spoke about his own childhood, revealing complexities in his relationship with Liam that I had never considered. 1 year after inheriting Stewart Construction, I invited Jack to join a newly formed advisory board alongside industry experts and community leaders. The role carried prestige but limited authority, a gesture of inclusion without compromising the company's future. Thank you for this opportunity, he said when I offered it. I won't disappoint you. I hope not, I replied honestly. Grandfather wanted you to have a path back. This is part of that path. The healing between us wasn't complete, and perhaps never would be. Some wounds leave permanent scars. But the shift from that cold dismissal the day after the funeral to our cautious collaboration marked growth neither of us thought possible. As for Stewart Construction, the company thrived under my leadership. We stayed true to Liam's core values while embracing sustainable building practices and community projects. The Liam Stewart Foundation grew to support dozens of students each year, building a pipeline of passionate young workers who brought new energy into the industry. But the most profound change happened within me. The girl who once craved her father's approval had become a woman confident in her own judgment. The uncertainty I felt when inheriting the company had transformed into steady conviction. I honored my grandfather's legacy not by preserving it unchanged, but by evolving it thoughtfully. 2 years to the day after Liam's death, I visited his grave alone. The simple headstone bore his name, his life dates, and the words he had chosen: "True wealth is measured in lives touched, not dollars earned." "You were right about so many things," I whispered, placing fresh roses by the stone. "About the company. About Dad. About me." The autumn breeze stirred golden leaves across the cemetery grounds. In that quiet moment, I felt deep gratitude for my grandfather's final lesson, perhaps his most important one, that true family is defined by love and respect, not just blood or legal documents. The inheritance he left me was far greater than money or property. It was the understanding that how we treat others reveals our true character. It was the courage to stand by my values, even when faced with rejection. And it was the wisdom to see that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it does make space for new beginnings. As I drove back to the house that was now truly my home, I reflected on how quickly life can change. In just 24 hours, I had gone from homeless to the owner of a $56 million company. But the real transformation had taken longer, and it reached far deeper than any legal transfer of assets. I learned that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what truly matters. And that lesson was the greatest inheritance of all. I hope this story resonated with you. Have you ever been underestimated, only for someone to regret it later? Or had a family member who taught you life's most important lessons through actions rather than words? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it touched your heart. I'm grateful for each of you who took the time to listen to my journey, and I look forward to hearing your stories too.